How much can you tell us about what happened on the night? What do you remember?
Well, I remember all of it, but the process that Parliament has adopted for investigations requires me not to speak to journalists about the investigation. So because the investigation hasn't concluded, I would be breaching a confidentiality agreement that I have signed if I spoke to you about the specifics of the investigation.
But what you can talk about is what has happened to you personally.
On a personal level, and don't get me wrong, look, I fully accept that at that time there were elements of my behaviour that were problematic, and some of the language I used was unacceptable, and alcohol was a factor in that, but alcohol is not an excuse for poor standards or behaviour, and it's absolutely right and proper. There's investigation into all of the circumstances.
But you've acknowledged that you have an issue with drink.
Almost a year in, I'm more able to talk about this than I would have been even at the time. So I stopped drinking on the 1st of March last year. I had to stagger down my drinking, for want of a better word, because of the volume that it was at.
How much were you drinking?
So, 200 units a week. And I was
14 is the recommended level.
Yeah. So I was many multiple times what was considered wise healthily, but I've always been a big drinker. Taking the decision to stop was a big one, and is probably the only way I will stay healthy and alive, because as part of the process of stopping, I was subject to some health checks, and they discovered I had atrial fibrillation. My heart was going like the clappers, and irregular and too fast. So
did you grade yourself as an alcoholic, a binge drinker, a drunk? Do you know which you were?
I would, now looking back, I would say I would say I've always been a problem drinker, and that comes from being from a family where I was in the pub with my mum at 14. I remember being really drunk at 15, and Dad saying afterwards, if you didn't come home and throw up in a pond, I'd be more worried about you, because it was a part of learning a normal life in the Coyle family.
So your drinking isn't to be blamed on the culture at Parliament? It was happening before you became an MP?
So what I would say is that for those who have either big drinking backgrounds or the potential, because the vast majority of people drink and never have a problem, right? So let's be frank. There are some of us who have an underlying predilection, whatever, call it what you like, where you can become more. And I would say I had a dependency. The habitual drinking after work that I'd never been a day drinker, and the public perception of the alcoholic, someone who's got
but did Parliament contribute to your ability to drink that much?
Yes, because it's everywhere within Westminster, but also in previous years I always lost weight and drank less when Parliament wasn't sitting, always. I wouldn't have had the dependency had I not been drinking so much, so routinely. So
how concerned should voters be about the drinking culture in Parliament?
I think it is problematic, and I hope to see more of the 0% options. I mean, it's not, people still have a mindset of calibre being the only option and things like that, and other bad low alcohol beers are available out there if you have to say anything like that. But the options now are much greater, and they should be on the pump. If someone says no to a drink, please respect that choice.
Do you know many other heavy drinkers in Parliament, other fellow MPs?
Of course. There are people who, even at the time, I got myself into trouble, there were others drinking more than me, who I would regularly be drinking with. So,
what are the worst excesses you see? So,
there are people in Parliament, and this is don't think this is just MPs. This is not. This is journalists. This is there's 30,000 pass holders in Westminster. But there are people who drink throughout the day. I was never, I only drank after work, but managed to top up the tally I've given you. So, it gives you an idea of what the potential can be. My casework volumes are very, very high. I and my team bust a gut in Bermondsey and Old Southwark. I
wanted to ask you that. Did your drinking affect your ability as a constituency MP? Did you let your constituents down?
So I would say, no, my stats speak for themselves, and I'm very proud of the work I and my team do in the constituency. 5,000 constituents were in touch with me last year with responses on housing is the biggest issue, but immigration issues with the Home Office, all kinds of different issues they can answer. But also look at my track record here in Westminster. As a backbench member of the opposition, there are amendments I've got through, including recently on protecting the RNL life prosecution.
What do you hope will come out of you talking about this?
I hope that others will take steps to examine how much, the quantity that they're drinking, and whether you know, I need a drink after work is I need or is I want.
What about your future? You've lost the Labour whip. You presumably want to get that back.
I do, absolutely.
And do you intend to seek re-selection?
Yes.
To stand again as the MP for
Yes,
Bermondsey?
and what's been amazing in the constituent local community in Southwark is the level of support that's come out of this. Community groups like the Afghan refugee group, the Somali group, local Sierra Leone.
And have
groups.
you had support from the Labour Party and fellow MPs?
Of course, MPs from you know, the party has a sort of pastoral element, and one of the conditions of getting the Labour whip back is following it whilst suspended. I still pay my subs to the PLP, so you know I'm very.
Have you spoken to the leader, Sir Keir Starmer?
No, I've never had a discussion with Sir Keir about this since suspension. I thought it was best to let the process conclude. I wish the process had been faster, obviously, but that has to follow its course. And I don't want to prejudice him in any way, and I think that's right and proper. And I hope that there's a fair outcome of this, and I believe a fair outcome does include me getting the whip back and given the chance.
And have you given up drink for good, forever?
Yes, yeah. And when I stopped last year, I didn't think it would be forever. But the longer the longer I've done it, and the more the benefits come through, the more determined I am on a health, work and family level to make sure I sustain it. And the benefits are colossal. I mean, you've met me before. I hope you can see that I've lost weight. You know, I've lost 2.5 stone since last March. I get the best sleep of my adult life. I've saved hundreds of pounds. I get time back that wouldn't have been there. And you ask a question, I'll be completely honest with you about this. There is more I could have done as an MP. And I wish I could get that time back. But you know, I'm resolute now that I will use my time better going forward.